Assalamu alaikum. My name is Zarina Shakir, and welcome to Profound Conversations, something that I think a lot of us have these days. And I would like to introduce our guest today, who, before I introduce her, I would like to say is a rather amazing woman. And let's say she can multitask on so many things. Dr. Rana Dejani, welcome to the program, Profound Conversations. And let's just begin.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm so excited to be here to share and to learn.
Inshallah. Dr. Dejani, can we do just a very, very brief bit of background, little introduction, something that you and I spoke about very briefly? And this is not something that others are aware of, but I asked you, what did you think you wanted to be? Because I'm going to explain who you are or what you listed in your bio, but what did you want to be when you were about 5 or 10 years old? When you really began to think about what your career goals would be for you?
That's a great question. It takes me back, way, way, way back. I think I grew up reading a lot, stories and novels and science books. So I had an image in my mind, I think, of being a pioneer, somebody who discovers new things. And I think it was more towards the actual discovery, like exploring a mountaintop or going to Mars or, down in the deep ocean or Antarctica, pushing the limits, the boundaries. That was my dream.
At that age, really?
Oh yeah, yeah. and that's why I try retrospectively to kind of connect the dots and say, so I couldn't travel physically. So I thought if I go and start exploring cells, it would be like pushing that frontier, but inside a cell, inside working with the molecules.
So let me at least begin to speak to who you are and what I've read about you. You have a PhD in molecular cellular biology. Now say that 10 times fast, right? Molecular cellular biology. But also you've traveled to numerous colleges and universities. You've taught at many places, and you've had the opportunity to teach in various areas. I want to at least do just a little background by saying that you have a book that we're going to kind of go back and forth through the book because this explains why and who you are today. Five Scarves. Five Scarves. Why don't you explain to us what five scarves mean to you?
Yeah, so a lot of people when they introduce themselves, they say they play multiple roles. And in English, when you talk about your different roles, you talk about wearing multiple hats. Right. And since I don't wear a hat, I wear a scarf. I called my book Five Scarves to represent the 5 roles that I play in my life. So the first scarf, or the first role that I'm the most proud of actually, is being a mother. Because nobody can replace me in being a mother, but every other role can be replaced to a certain extent. And I think we need to bring this up front for both fathers and mothers, that the most important thing we can do is bring up the next generation and do it right. So that's my first scarf. My second scarf, or second role, is being an educator. So actually, before becoming a professor and doing my PhD, I was a school teacher for 10 years. There was no PhD programs in Jordan, and so I became a school teacher and taught science from grade 1 to grade 12. And to me, although some may think, oh, you didn't get your dream till later, to me that was, retrospectively, that was a very important part of my life, understanding children, families, teachers, administration, because the second most important role any human being can play for humanity is being a teacher. Because kids, if they're not spending their time at home with their parents, they're spending it in school with their teachers. So again, my hat off to every teacher and every educator, because their job is not easy, I know that, but it's the most important thing that they can serve humanity.
Yes.
Go ahead, sorry.
Well, let me just stop right there, because being a teacher and being a mother, pretty much all mothers are teachers, as are fathers. And that's what I usually say when I've taught school to people, that when a parent comes in and says, well, I thought you were her teacher. I am her teacher, but you were her first teacher. So for you, mother being first, I get it. And I do believe others will get it. Let me just also now say, you are half Palestinian and half Syrian. You live and have lived a long time in Jordan. So tell us a little bit about how you got to Jordan, and a little bit about your background as Palestinian and Syrian, and what that actually means to you today in your particular positions, because we do want to get to some of the other things that Profound Conversations focuses on.
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, in the Middle East, where these countries that you mentioned, Syria, Palestine, Jordan, and we can add Iraq and Lebanon and other countries exist today. These countries 70 years ago did not exist. It was one big country. There were no borders. These borders, these lines were created by the colonizer after they left and divided us up into Jordan, Syrian, Palestinian, Lebanese. So therefore, it's very natural. Most people who live in this region are a mix of cultures and ethnicities, just like me. It's just that, to bring it up and talk about it is just to share a lesson of how we're all so similar. We're all human beings. We all come from the same origin, and we need to celebrate our diversity while acknowledging how much alike we are, so that we can work together. And so going forward from this kind of mentality, I feel, I consider myself a human, a global citizen that belongs to the whole world, and wanting to serve the whole world of humanity, starting with, my closest circle, which is where I live, my neighborhood, my town, my city, my country, and then the region around it, and then the whole globe. And the universe, right? We can think as big as we want. So that's how I look at it. And actually, this reminds me of probably this relates. So usually when I'm talking about the 5 scarves, when I come to the last one, which is the 5th one, we'll talk about the other 2, 3, and 4 later. But when I come to the last one, I usually tell people, I'm not going to tell you. Go read the book, and then you'll know. But this time I'm going to tell you. So the last one was actually, I received an email a couple of years ago telling me that I was chosen as one of the most influential female scientists in the Islamic world, which is like 1.7 billion people. So that was kind of an honor and, believe me, a responsibility. But as I was going through the email, they had given a title for each one of us. So there was the cardiologist, the mathematician, and I'm going down to see what did they give me as a title. And lo and behold, they gave me the title of Islamic feminist. And I said, no, you can't do that, because I'm not an Islamic feminist. I'm a scientist. I'm a social entrepreneur, mother, teacher, but I never intended to be labeled in that way. So they refused to change it. And the result was that I embarked on a journey to redefine what that means according to my own terms. Many times in life you get labeled with terms and stereotypes, and I didn't want that to happen. So I kind of reclaimed it, and that was the reason I wrote my book. It was to reclaim what that means. And today, no, I am not an Islamic feminist. I am a human being, right? Who happens to be a Muslim, and who happens to be a scientist, and who defends all human rights, including women, because they have been disfranchised and treated unjustly for a long time all over the world, not in particular in one culture rather than the other. So I invite you to read the book and to learn more about my views on that. But that's just back to your point about not being labeled, being a human being, and celebrate that.
Well, let me just say to you, Dr. Jujani, I consider myself as an Islamic feminist. So when I saw that and read that and heard you speak on TED Talks, I thought, okay, so she doesn't want to be an Islamic feminist or doesn't want to be labeled as one. And I don't want to be labeled, but that I can say is part of who I am. So it's okay, whether you choose to do this or not. Let us at least get to the number 3 and number 4 in terms of the scarves, so that we can then move on into some of the areas that you have absolutely and profoundly become almost an expert in. So, scarf number 3, what was that?
That's being a scientist. I get a kick and a thrill, just like I told you earlier, growing up, wanting to explore nature around me, being curious, asking questions, which is part of our evolution, right? To be curious. And that's how we survived as a species. So that led me to study my PhD, and that dream stayed with me. Remember, I said I wasn't able to go into a PhD program till later, after I got married and I had 4 kids. And then when the opportunity offered itself in a Fulbright scholarship, I went with my husband and 4 children to the U.S. and did my PhD, and came back older, but still young in heart, and I became a scientist. And I actually were the world experts in 2 fields. So one of them is I study ethnic populations, and I look at the complex diseases where there's an interplay between genetics and the environment. So it's nature and nurture working together, and how does that manifest biologically, and if something goes wrong, how does that make a disease? And I work on diabetes, and we discovered a novel gene risk factor for diabetes in these 2 populations, and we were able to publish in Nature, which is kind of really big for any scientist around the world. The second field of expertise is I study the impact of trauma on epigenetics. So you inherit your DNA from your parents, but also as you are exposed to the environment, your DNA, how your DNA is expressed can change as a result of interaction with the environment, whether it's your lifestyle, what you eat, how much you exercise, or if you're exposed to trauma. And in our part of the world, unfortunately, there's a lot of trauma from war, displacement, again, being refugees. And so I study that kind of trauma. Mm-hmm. And how it impacts the physiology of a human being, and then how it can impact your DNA. And we're asking now the really, really important question: if I'm exposed to trauma, do I transfer that epigenetic signature to my children, to my grandchildren? And can that be positive, not negative? Because always people are looking for the negative, what's bad and so on. And I'm an optimist. My husband says I see an ocean in a drop of water. So I want to see, as humans, we've evolved. We've always been, going through multiple crises, yet we have been able to be resilient and survive. So I want to look at this transmission of this epigenetic signature. Can it favor positive, optimistic, resilient kind of traits or features in future generations? And this will help us not just understand how the trauma affects us, but it will help us understand to develop better interventions and programs to help prevent escalation or any manifestation of disease.
Okay, so let us pursue a little bit of this science and where we are today in 2020 and this pandemic, and how what you have researched and what you've discovered, and diabetes is also one of those unfortunate diseases, if I have to call it a disease, an ailment that people have to be mindful that this virus and other things can affect them on a global level. What can you say, or what do you say, Dr. Dejani, about your work and how you can somehow get with other scientists and the people, let's say some of the leaders in this world, to explain what we need to do?
That's a very important question. And I think, and especially now, it's very relevant with COVID-19 and the pandemic all over the world. I think what we've come to realize is a number of points. First is that as scientists, we have a responsibility to employ our skills and expertise in trying to understand the origins of the pandemic. So this is strictly scientifically, right? How it happens, how it spreads, and therefore how can we prevent it, whether it's developing vaccines or therapy and so on. So this is one thing, and I think the world is really going forward, putting all the efforts together, and we're creating teams across the globe because everybody's affected. It's not just one country and not the other. So the pandemic had a silver lining in that all scientists were coming together and putting all their efforts together, and publishing is very fast, and testing is very fast, and so on. So that's a very important thing. And because the whole world is affected, kind of this rift between developed and developing, or rich and poor, is kind of melting away because we're all suffering the same thing. And even in terms of behavior, we see countries who are termed developing are actually behaving in terms of protection against the pandemic, precautions, are doing much better than other countries who, in quotes, are more developed. And this speaks to culture and humanity and the richness of different cultures around the world. And that's a lesson learned. Also, but at the same time, we've had a lot of fake news coming out as well. And I'm sure because of the interactivity and the digital technology and the internet, it's easy for anybody to dump anything online without anybody to really regulate what's out there. So that creates kind of a negative thing for the general public. Who do we trust, right? Who should we listen to? And again, that's a responsibility for scientists to actually be out there, to be vocal, to be good communicators, to present resources, authentic resources, and to keep reminding not just the general public, but general avenues, the media, of what is right, what is true, and to do that effectively. So those two things are, to me, are what I see coming out of the pandemic going forward. And also the third thing I want to say, the pandemic is not new in the sense that there's always been pandemics in the past that have happened, right? We know the 1918 flu, we know the plague in the 19th century, and so on. So this is not new. It's just that in our memory, it's new because we're all living it now. And it's about what can we learn from this going forward? What is really important? It helped me reshuffle my priorities. Who am I? What do I want from this world? And then how to help others, right? How to lead? What is important? And then it puts in focus, there was a lot of challenges we were facing as a global community, whether in education, in health, in nutrition, in equality. And I think what the pandemic has done is really focused everything, given clarity. Because in the past, people would say, we can't fix this. It's too expensive. It's too difficult. There's too much bureaucracy. But with COVID-19, we've come to see that a lot of this bureaucracy, a lot of these excuses or barriers have actually disappeared because now there's a will. There's no other way. And therefore, we are able to work from home. We are able to do conferences on Zoom. We are able to reimagine education. So I think again, this is a silver lining to me going forward. Like, how can we use this to do what in the past seemed to be impossible and to move forward?
Dr. Chitani, let me stop you there and let us go back a little bit in your background. I must admit that I'm not completely familiar with what molecular cell biology is, but my question, going along with your background and what you do in terms of science and your research, we're all faced with trying to, not us, we're not doctors, we're not scientists, but you are, and we're waiting for, or many people are waiting globally for a vaccine. Could you tell us briefly what it takes to come to the end result of a vaccine? And I'm going to kind of put you on the spot right now, and who should get it first?
Oh, wow. Okay. These are really complex questions. Again, just as a disclaimer, yes, I am a molecular cell biologist, but my field is not working on vaccines. So I'll just share what I know from what I've read, because I like to keep abreast of what's happening, but by no means I'm not the expert on development of vaccines. But in general, in order to develop a vaccine, there's a number of steps, right? You need to, first of all, develop it in a lab, make sure it works. And there's multiple already efforts doing that using different technologies and different approaches. There's not just one approach for developing a vaccine, without going into detail. But then the second step is actually testing it on humans to make sure that it's safe. And that takes time because you want to make sure you have enough people. You want to make sure that it's safe for people. And it's not about safe for 2 days. You want to make sure it's safe for a period of time, because you don't know what the consequences or the side effects are. And that takes time as well. And usually any vaccine takes 5 to 10 years to develop. And now everything is being accelerated because of the impact of the pandemic, and because of the resources and money and funding and capacity being thrown at it to make it faster. But there's always a limit of physiology to test these vaccines. But then even with all the acceleration of producing a vaccine, you have the next step of of shipping it, making it available to the 7 billion people around the world. It's about mass production. It's about keeping it, some of these have to be at a certain temperature so that it doesn't go bad. And then you need to transport it, and then you need to deliver it to different places around the world. So these are other steps that people don't think about. They think, I've got a vaccine, that's it. No, there's many other steps on the way that need to be done. And so, yes, it's going to be accelerated compared to normal vaccine production. Maybe it'll be done in a year or two. And I'm sure everybody's following the news to exactly when it's going to come out. To your second part of your question, who gets it first? That's a very important question. And again, this is not my field. This would need bioethicists, right? And as well as those who produce the vaccines and the availability of the vaccine to come together and decide ethically, as well as all the other limitations and restrictions, who gets it first. And actually, we ran a group in Jordan, ran a simulation of a survey asking people, who would you give the vaccine to, right? If a vaccine was developed, it was a survey about bioethics. And it was a discussion, there was like choices. One, would you give the vaccine to children first? Or would you give it to elderly people since they are more susceptible? Or would you give it to those who have money? Or would you give it to people, health workers who are on the front line, who are more exposed? Or would you give it to those who have very important jobs, right? So physicians or teachers or, who can, contribute to society. It was very interesting to see the range of answers, which varied across, right? And then one really interesting thing that came out of that survey, because there was do you have another reason? There was that question. And something came out saying that one thing that wasn't considered in the survey is giving a reason to those who take care of the family, the parents. And in the survey that was developed actually in a Western perspective, that was not put as one of the choices. So the importance of community and support and family is very, very important, and we mustn't overlook that as well.
So let me just ask you, as a result of this survey, and who you and I happen to be Muslims, and I'm not saying that you give the vaccine or anything just to Muslims, but looking at, to me, the bigger picture, God, Allah, and what we are required to do. And there unfortunately seem to be a number of people that don't quite understand what it is that Muslims do, that we do have a task on this earth, and what you've already presented. We're human beings, or are we just being human? What does that actually mean? So can you just say to us what being human is, and what your, let's say what your requirements, what you follow as the principles for your life? We know that the Quran is part of who we all are as Muslims, but how do you live this?
Yeah, that's a very important question. When I say I'm a human being, similar to the 7 billion human beings on Earth, I think this speaks to how we evolved as a species, how we exist in this world. Part of our existence is that we have developed a brain and a conscience, and this results in us asking questions and being curious. And asking questions eventually will result why are we here? What is the purpose of our existence? What is my role? And I'm sure many of us have actually re-asked that question during the pandemic, all isolated at home. With everything changing, you reassess everything. And I think what happened in my case, I consider the Quran, which is what Islam is a guide to answer those questions. Why do I exist? And to me, the answer is to make this world a better place for all of humanity, right? Regardless of your religion, regardless of your culture, your background, or who you are. How can I help humanity to have a better life? Using the ethics and the values that my religion shares with me. And by the way, the ethics and the values in my religion, Islam, our shared universal values of, do unto others as you want to do on yourself, be honest, right? Take care of others. These are universal values. But to me, Islam has put them in a very practical, logical way, because in Islam, we celebrate the brain. We celebrate responsibility. We celebrate humanity. We celebrate who we are biologically. And I think those are beautiful things that I see in Islam, and that, incentivizes me and gives me a clear path on how I should conduct myself going forward. So I'll give you an example. So some of the values I grew up on, which stem from my religion, are that you are responsible. We are all responsible for the community around us, not just our own selves. And so from that kind of feeling of responsibility is what led me to my fourth scarf, by the way, which is creating a program to help children read for fun. So I'm a scientist. I have nothing to do with this, but that feeling of responsibility came from my religion, that if I have knowledge or experience, expertise or skills, I can't keep it with me. I have to give it to others. And another value that stemmed from religion in my upbringing as a Muslim is that what matters is you have to try. You don't have to succeed. All you have to do is try, your intention to do good. And that's so freeing, then you're not scared to fail. You're not scared to make a mistake, because what matters is your sincere intention to do good. Yeah. And to me, that was wonderful. And that was amazing. That's what helped me be a better human being, a better scientist, a better teacher, a better parent.
So let us go to scarf number 4, which you just alluded to a moment ago, but that is part of where I wanted to go before we went back to the 5th scarf, and explain what number 4 is.
So number 4, I'm a social entrepreneur. Of course, I realized that later, retrospectively. What I did is, again, stemming from my values that come from from Islam. When you change from one country to another or city to another, you see the world in a different way. And I realized that children in my community, and then later on I realized all over the world, by the way, they don't read for fun. They read. They all know how to read. They go to school. But they don't read for fun. That fun under the covers, you can't wait to finish the book. That kind of reading is what allows a child to reap the benefits of reading, to widen the imagination, to increase your vocabulary so you're better at expressing yourself, to learn about other cultures and other people so you can start developing solutions for your own challenges inside your neighborhood. Or you become the hero you read about because you get the courage from the story to do it, even if people think that, what are you doing? It's like, I'm going to be that hero. And so therefore reading for fun to me is fundamentally important for changing people. I mean, our mantra is changing mindsets through reading to create change makers. And so my scientific mind started asking, so how do I, why don't children read for fun, right? And especially as Muslims, the first word is iqra, right? Read. And not read in the sense that you can read letters. No, read meaning reaping the benefits of reading, for it to have an impact on you, to change you. And so with observations and research, I realized children don't read for fun because they don't love to read. They're not motivated. So then the question became, so how do I help children fall in love with reading? And I realized the way a child falls in love with reading is when they have a role model. So their parents, their caregivers are reading aloud to them because they enjoy reading. That's what's lacking, at least in my part of the world and in many parts of the world. And so I found the solution, right? That it's every parent should read aloud. So I thought, so what do I do? Do I knock on the door of every parent? I mean, that's not practical. Do I tell the government, you should pass a law, every parent should read aloud? Well, that doesn't mean people are going to listen. So I thought, and again, back to my values, I thought, you need to be the change you want to see in the world, like Gandhi said, or like Prophet Muhammad said, you're the guardian. Take care of your community. So I read to my kids, but that's not enough. That's just my kids. I wanted to do it to the wider community. And I couldn't sleep at night because I felt this responsibility, because I know what to do. And so my family, my husband and kids, we came together and we created like a small project where we thought we're going to gather the kids in the neighborhood and read aloud to them in a public space. In Jordan, there's a mosque in every neighborhood. So we thought, why don't we use the mosque? It's empty half the time. It's got a carpet. It's got a bathroom. Why don't we use it? And so what happened is the imam got so excited as well, and he announced that we're going to read aloud. And parents thought it was about education, reading, or because it's in the mosque, they thought it was religion, but it had nothing to do with either. Right. It was about reading for fun. So it was about, stories of the child who wants to run away, who doesn't want to kiss his auntie, those kinds of stories. And it was in their native language. And so the kids came and they fell in love with the books, and they would take them home and they would start reading to themselves, to their siblings, or they would beg their parents to read to them. So we kind of flipped the equation. Rather than the parent dragging the kid to read. It was the children begging their parents to read. And then the children started demanding books instead of toys, wanting to go to school because they realized they could unlock the magic by learning how to read more.
Okay,
And
so let me just stop you though. Let me
yeah,
just let you know, because I understand that your program, We Love Reading, is in just under 60 countries. But let me also say that I am, and I know a number of people, we're actually called storytellers. Storytellers is pretty much the same thing that you're saying for people, particularly for young people, but even for adults, even for people who are in nursing homes and other places that just want someone to read to them. So what you've done, you have a solution that you have come upon, but it was there. It's already been done for hundreds of years, but in a different manner, not necessarily from a book. In parts of West Africa, you're considered what's called a griot,
oh,
but still, that's a storyteller. And a lot of cultures have been passed down through the storytelling process. Your program being in other countries, does this help young people not just reading, but as I think I read that you said about learning, but also leading? Where does leadership come in with what you've developed?
absolutely. What you said, so the program we eventually called it We Love Reading is exactly, it's an ancient, it's an ancient thing that we all do without thinking. But as in all things around us, things that are so simple, no brainers, people forget about it, or they don't realize how important it is because they think anything important has to be fancy and complex. Yet it can be as simple as doing what your grandmother used to do. And that's what We Love Reading is all about. And that's why it succeeded, by the way, because it's so simple. It's just a framework. Read aloud to kids in your native language, anywhere you want.
Yes.
That's it, which anybody can do. So it's not just parents, it's teachers, it's youth, it's grandparents, all reclaiming themselves, finding their inner potential and outer potential, or I like to say they have really discovered how to read literally and figuratively, found their voice, because now they're reading to kids, but they've realized that they have become leaders in their own right, in their own community. And especially that most of them are women. These women have gone beyond and found better jobs, created their own programs or projects, and become more resilient and less stressed and anxious, and gone ahead gaining respect from the local community, and all on a volunteer basis, because the program fosters in this feeling of agency. I'm doing it for myself. I'm doing it for me because they own the program. So that's another secret sauce of We Love Reading, as we call it, is because most programs are about employing people or asking people to do something. No, We Love Reading is about people wanting to do it for themselves. And that's the difference. That's the thin line between feeling that ownership that allows the program to be sustainable even 4 and 5 years after people have taken the training. And so both the children and the adults fall in love with reading, discover their inner potential, and therefore become lifelong learners, because learning is beyond the classroom and beyond the age of 18. It goes on to the last minute of our lives. And this is how the new imagination of education is coming out to be, especially during COVID-19. And this is the vision that we're looking at. And it's about building that resilience for the children and the adults. And that goes back to our logo now, is changing mindsets through reading to create change makers who don't have to wait for somebody to come and save them. They can save themselves. They can come up with their own solutions because they know better the root causes of the challenges they face in their everyday life. And therefore, they create solutions that they own, that are sustainable going forward. So that's what We Love Reading is in a nutshell. And I want to add one thing we've included in it is research. So because I'm a scientist, I wanted to include scientists. Of course, it's not my field to study cognitive skills or, mental health or resilience. So we've invited scientists from around the world, from, well-known universities like Yale or Brown or University of Chicago, to come and study We Love Reading's impact on both on the children and on the adults and on the wider community. Because what we've seen is that the community has had a mindset of I can. And that's so important going forward to help cope with all the challenges we're facing in the pandemic and beyond the 21st century.
Right. Dr. Jajani, I just thought of something while you were speaking about all of that, have you been to any of the HBCUs, the historically black colleges and universities in the United States? At least one?
Yes, so I visited one actually a few years ago in 2014. It was an all women's black university. And I was hosted by the president, and it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And I would love to go again and visit and share and learn, because actually I'm learning more than anything else by listening to the different, opinions and experiences of different people.
And the reason I mentioned what the HBCUs is, just a little background to you and to others. One of the horrible things that happened to Black people in America, African Americans, or whatever name people choose to be or be called, um, reading, people were lynched and executed for doing that. If you were even in possession of a book, it could be the Bible. It was definitely not probably the Quran at that time, but any book in a black person's hand was something where they could be killed for that. And I say HBCUs because that was part of their mission, was to teach us to read and write. There were a number of schools that were basically around vocational skills, but even with vocational skills, you have to know how to read and write a manual or instructions or something. And so I'm offering to you the opportunity and the possibility of also looking at your program and seeing how perhaps some of the HBCUs may be able to use this and come out into the communities and assist others to learn how to read. Because just like where you were coming from in Jordan and other countries, there are a number of young people in America and in the West that do not read. Some of them, it's not even about reading for fun. They don't read at all. But that's not to say that they can't, because people have to read their cell phones, they read their text messages. That's reading. So with that being said, I want to ask you, what was the most difficult thing for you, as you've grown up and you're an adult, to grasp? What was the hardest thing for you to be able to excel or succeed in?
Oh, well, that's a that's a very deep question. I think what my answer to that is, of course, I've encountered a lot of difficult situations. I
Mm-hmm.
can't pinpoint one, because I think the reason is the way I approach anything that's difficult is by turning it into an opportunity in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that comes because I have a wide imagination and I grew up reading a lot. But when I look back, I can't find any difficult situation. I can only find an opportunity that I learned from and kept going. That's how I would define that difficulty. So, for example, I wanted to become a scientist, and I couldn't go into a PhD program in Jordan. There weren't any, and when I even got accepted to go to England, I didn't have the money, so I couldn't go. So that's something difficult. How do you cope with it? So what I did is I thought, okay, I'm going to be the best teacher in the world, and I became a school teacher. And I
Mm-hmm.
made it the best experience ever. So it wasn't, oh yeah, I'm going to be a teacher. No, it was, whoa, I'm going to be the best teacher. But I kept that dream going. Or for example, if I apply for a grant for We Love Reading or for my science and it doesn't work, I don't say, oh my God. I thought, I know 9 out of 10 I'm going to lose. And to me, this is an opportunity to learn from the reviewers what was lacking, how can I write this better. And because I embrace that, I don't call it failure, I embrace that opportunity to learn. It doesn't beat me down. It's just, it helps raise me to learn more and to go forward. So I think it's all about, how you look at things, how you perceive things in your mind, that helps you keep on being positive, learning from that experience and moving forward. And I always tell my students, you have to make mistakes. If you're not making mistakes, that means you're too comfortable, you're in the wrong place. And so, but don't make the same mistake twice. You can make a different mistake every day. That's fine. So that's how I look at it going forward.
I think, this being one of my last questions to you, uh, I want you to tell us, what is it like for people who have lived, let's say, in some of the places, Syria, Jordan. I think I've read that Jordan and Kenya, and I think even Greece in Lesbos had some of the largest refugee camps. What is that experience, very briefly, like for someone to try and just navigate themselves into a normal life?
Well, thank you for the question. And to do it justice, I cannot really answer it because I have not lived in a refugee camp myself. So whatever I
Right.
say is going to be secondhand, and I would not do justice, and I don't have the right to explain what it feels like or anything because I haven't lived that. Just
But
out
what
of
did you
respect.
see when you perhaps were
Yeah,
uh,
yeah. No, I mean, but I had to say that as a disclaimer
yeah,
first because
no,
this is
that's
a responsibility going forward. And I also want to add that the situation of refugees differs from camp to camp, from country to country, and so they're not comparable. And some are much, much worse than others. I think Jordan is one of the refugee camps in Jordan are much better than compared to other camps in Kenya or Uganda or Greece. Jordan is much, much better. Okay, so I know Jordan. In that sense, regardless, just being displaced and not having security and being in a place where you're scared or you don't know what's going to, maybe scared not because you're going to be attacked, but scared because you don't know what's going to happen in the future. We don't realize that. We all live, we know we're in our home, we know what we're going to worry about, but these people, they don't know what the future holds for them. This is really devastating and very, very hard. And I cannot even imagine to describe it or even relate to it.
okay.
But to me, going forward, it's about what we can do together to help build that feeling of agency and resilience, and to remove that feeling of hopelessness. Because as humans, as we evolved, there was always been wars and fights, right? And we've been able to be resilient and to survive. So we need to help people remember that and to go forward and help each other positively. And most importantly, I'm going to add this last thing, is how can we use science to help people cope with the stress and trauma? What we've seen in Jordan is that when you explain the science to the kids, to the parents, and explain to them what's happening in their brain, what's happening in their psychology, in their physiology, it helps them realize that it's not their fault if they're feeling anxious or stressed. That this is normal response of the body, and that this can be taken care of, whether it's through interventions or medicine or whatever, but it's normal and it's natural. And together, if we come together, we can help each other going forward.
Okay. So I see Kareem is there. I just had one last question,
Oh
Dr.
no, well we want you to come back to your to close out with your questions. This isn't to
Oh,
stop you from your interview, but if you want
okay.
to ask that, yeah, I just had a couple questions just to just give you a break in a sense, if you like.
Thank
Uh,
you.
so Dr. Dejani, a question
Yes.
that we have from the audience is, how does the study of science lend to our understanding and implementation of effective leadership?
Oh, that's a very important question as well. You know, today science is actually in every sector, in every discipline. In the past, maybe people would think, what does science have to do with leadership? But we know today, no, they are related, because leadership in the end is a mix of nurture and nature. It's your genetics, and it's also your environment and what you were exposed to, how you learn to deal with failure, how you learn to deal with people coming from different backgrounds or different psychologies and so on. So leadership is a real science. And today I'm at the Jepson School of Leadership at the University of Richmond, which is also core in teaching leadership, and one of the first schools that actually focuses on that. So we can learn a lot about our physiology to understand the chemicals going on in our brain, our genes, but we can also learn that we are not held account to our genes, that there's a huge potential in nurture and how we can learn, how we can emulate, how we can look at role models, whether negative to learn not to be that way, or positive how to be that way, and to develop our own, figure out things on our own through trial and error. So yes, science is core, and we need to include more of that going as well.
Yeah, another question. Thank you. Another question. Interesting. Nature versus nurture. The question is: are we headed in the right direction with our current trends in artificial intelligence?
Yeah, that's that's another $1 billion question. And that's not just artificial intelligence. Actually, it's the ethics of everything, right? Whether it's in CRISPR, which won the Nobel Prize last week, in terms of gene editing and stem cell technology, or artificial intelligence for that matter. So the way I look at it is that science will always advance, right? It's like a train which is moving forward, and I think what the world should do is to get on that train so that they can help guide that train in the right direction, because the train's moving. We just need to hop on. And when I say we, I'm talking about all the stakeholders. So we're talking about religious leaders, we're talking about bioethicists, we're talking about lawyers, we're talking about families, patients, students. Every member of the community is important and counts and should have a say in how things go forward. So it's not about stopping it, it's about guiding it going forward and using the ethical universal values that we all share as humanity in guiding this, so that we can benefit humanity, taking what's good, avoiding what's bad. Yeah.
The last question I'll ask, there were a few more, but this is a little lengthy. But it says, as we move further into the 21st century, what will global leadership need to embody in order to effectively grapple with the vexing challenges of, say, climate change, population density, biodiversity, and some of the other economic realities post-COVID-19?
Okay, so there's no simple answer to that, but I can tell you different factors that influence what a good global good leadership should look like going forward. First thing we need to, and I'm going to work backwards. So any global leader should be elected by the people. That's very, very important, right? But again, you need to educate the people, right? To make sure that they have the right knowledge, the right skills, so that when they choose right. Because we have to respect the people and their collective choices. So our onus is on educating them. So educating the masses to raise that level, so that when they choose a global leader, they choose right. Then the global leader or the group at the top should always be in touch with the experts. So when we're talking about fields of science like climate change or biodiversity and so on, the scientists should always be experts giving advice to the leader on what are the scientific facts, what do we know, what do we don't know, and advising on the best way forward, learning from experience and going back and forth. So having those experts, and again, it's about having the universal values upheld, and justice and fairness to all, and not just fairness to a certain sector of the community and not to others. You're either everybody's equal or nobody's equal. And so upholding those values is very important, and to all humanity, and not favoring and not just any ethnic group over other or any religion over the other. It's about equality for all, respecting all, upholding those universal values. So that's the complicated short answer to your question going forward.
Thank you. Back to you, Cecilia.
Okay. Well, part of what you just asked, Kareem, but what I wanted to also ask Dr. Jajani about the award that you actually received, and what was your response when you first heard that you had won that award? And then I have a second part to that question, but I'd like you to answer this part first.
Well, when I heard, it was an honor, but it wasn't for me. It was for it was for all the women and men and youth and children who have been reading aloud to their children in different neighborhoods around the world. The We Love Reading ambassadors, they are the ones who are the program, and the award is for them. I'm just the catalyst. I'm just the person in the middle who's been able to help it happen, but actually it is for them. So it was very humbling. because to me, and it made me feel that I have a huge responsibility to spread it more and to reach every child in every neighborhood, because I feel it's a crime for a child to grow up not discovering his or her inner potential and the outer potential around them. So it was kind of like, okay, we've got a lot of work yet to do.
Yes. With the idea that you have with We Love Reading, are some of the books about climate change or, let's say, artificial intelligence, robots, a number of things that are going on in our world these days? And how do some of the young people that you have read to, or others that may have gotten back to you, how have they responded?
So yeah, many of the storybooks that we created to enrich the children's literature in Arabic are actually about, I mean, they're primarily for fun, but they have underlying themes. So we have a whole series about the environment, in terms of preserving the environment and climate change. We have a series of books on empathy and gender and disabilities and bullying and refugees, to respect and social inclusion. And we have some about science and robots and, you know, doing experiments and similar situations. And we're actually now creating some children books about COVID-19 to raise awareness among children as well. And of course, we've seen that the impact of just reading a story is very powerful, much more powerful if you want to change the child's attitude or behavior. If you can just sit around with them and read a book, and give them that book to read and look at the pictures. We've shown through research that we published recently, doing a pre and a post evaluation of the children, that their attitudes and practices, for example, towards the environment, improved 80%, which is much more efficient than TV ads and billboards, and which are very costly and do not necessarily change the behavior of the children.
Do most of the books that you've recommended or that have been given to you and your program, are most of them with illustrations and pictures or photos?
Oh yeah, of course, because if they're going to fall in love with reading, especially at an early stage, there's just a little bit of text and then a lot of pictures. And this helps even if the parents or can't read, they can make up the story from the pictures. And even if the child still can't read, they can, you know, just lose themselves in in the pictures that they're looking at and make up stories going forward. So this is that's the magic of reading. But the whole issue is to associate a book and a text with fun. Even if you don't understand what the text is, that's okay. But it sets up the child, it fosters that curiosity, kindles it, tickles it, so that they keep on, you know, I want to learn how to read. That's why they want to go to school, not because the school is any better or the teacher is better or trained. It's because they have that motivation. They want to unlock the magic. It's like basic business marketing, right? If somebody wants something, they will do anything. They'll move land and earth to get to it. And that's what we do. We instill that motivation by helping the children fall in love with reading.
Well, just a couple more things that I wanted to actually ask you. And one has to do with being a woman. And how do you reach out to other women besides your books, what you've written, and perhaps articles? How do you somehow encourage them and let them know, and you can do this too? What do you say?
So first of all, I mean, being a role model, I think is very powerful. To speak about your story, write your story, so people hear about it. And I tell, and when I talk or speak or share, whether I'm teaching or, you know, walking or in a car or in a train, or nobody's in a plane anymore these days. I share with my neighbors, right? I talk about what I do, and I share with them. And I think the most powerful message you can get across is when you are the manifestation of that message. We learn through examples. We learn through stories.
Yes.
It's about sharing stories. But what I tell my students is that everybody's important. You know, every human being is unique because their DNA is unique. Your DNA is different from any DNA of any human being that ever existed, will ever exist. Even if you're identical twins, you grow up in slightly different environments, you're different. And so because of that difference, you have something special to give to the world. And don't let the world miss out on how special you are. And so I asked them to share their story, to write about their perspective, how they perceive the world, how they look at it, and that they owe it. They owe it not just to themselves, they owe it to the next generation to write about themselves. Otherwise, somebody else will come in and write about us, or you or me. and they don't know who we are. So we owe it to the next generation to give them role models that look like them, that dress like them. And finally, I tell them, you need to find something that bothers you in your community, and think, what can you do on your own, not what the government should do, not what somebody else should do, what you can do, and just go do that little thing, right? And that's what happened to me. I thought, okay, kids don't read, I need to read to them. I gathered them and I read aloud to them. That was it. I wasn't thinking of anything else, because of that concept, that value that I have to try. And now We Love Reading is in 58 countries. So it's like, it's the chaos theory, or the butterfly effect. When a butterfly flutters its wings in one part of the world, it creates a hurricane in another part of the world. So when you do that little thing, make your little good deed, which is from Prophet Muhammad saying, do not belittle any good deed. You're changing the community around you, but in ways and in time that you will never imagine. And that's all we can do. And that's amazing. And that's wonderful. And I tell my students and everybody that you need to believe in yourself. You need to dream big and believe in yourself. And society has to trust you. You as a woman, they should trust you, because you know better what's right and what's wrong. And you know better what's important now versus tomorrow. You know your priorities. Society should trust women. And because if they trust them and women do what they think is right, they will be happier. And when they're happier, it's contagious. Everybody around them will become happy. And that way we can create a better community and change the better future for our generation.
Well, Dr. Trezani, I just want to say thank you so much. You have what I'm now calling the AIM concept, which is aspiration, inspiration, and motivation.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing with us today, and may God bless you as you could proceed on your journey. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I have been enriched by knowing you all. Thanks.
And we, on behalf of the Muslim Life Planning Institute, want to thank you both. We want to thank Dr. Rana Dajani as our episode 5 guest, and also our guest host today, Zarina Shakir, at the helm, and what a fine job. I wanted to just read a few acknowledgments before we end today's broadcast. The Muslim Life Planning Institute are the executive producers of Profound Conversations. The media expression and production work is done by the Aliyah Network. Webinar technical and logistics are produced by Erica Christie and Khadija Ali. Graphics, animations, flyers, Design Cafe. Again, today's host was Zarina Shakir, who is the host of Perspectives of Interfaith, which runs on a cable outlet channel in Arlington, Virginia, and I think throughout the country, right, on some internet platforms. And I've had the honor of working with Zarina Shakir for close to, if not over, 10 years. And as well had the pleasure and honor of meeting personally Dr. Dajani in Amman, Jordan, a few years ago. Thank you very much. On next week's program, I believe we're going to go into the area of governance and as well look at how we as a society begin to dismantle racism in its various forms. And so look for us next week, same time, same channel. Again, thank you so much, everyone, for attending today's webinar.